Hi, this is Teacher Jennifer here with Teacher Patricia, and we're here at CITISL. Teacher Patricia, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Patricia Hernandez, and I've been teaching citizenship for a long time.
Where do you teach right now?
Oh, I've taught in Los Angeles, and right now I'm teaching in Santa Monica.
Oh, and are you teaching strictly citizenship?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And are you teaching citizenship in English or Spanish?
English. I have in my past, when I have students who are qualified, they're going to be eligible to take the test in Spanish, then I put them in a small group and I can work with them. I certainly speak Spanish, but for my group as a whole, I always run it in English because that's the majority number here. But I always work. I don't presently have anybody who is eligible to take the test in Spanish. So
okay. Let us continue. You told me a very interesting story about one of your students from Oaxaca, Mexico. Can you talk about that, please?
Yes, she went a little over a week ago, and she was very well prepared. The most striking thing, the opening part, the very beginning of the interview, the officer was very pleasant, very nice. However, when they got into the office and she was sworn in, the first thing she did is she asked for the green card and the second ID, but she asked for all the passports. And so my student put all the passports there. The officer looked through the passports and said to my student, "Why are there only 5 stamps here?" And then the officer then proceeded to take out printed sheet with 25 dates of when my student had crossed the border probably from Tijuana back to the United States. And my student was floored. When she came and told me the story, I was floored. And the officer said, "These are how many trips? These are 25 trips that you've taken this year." And she said, my student just looked the officer in the eye and said, "Well, 5 trips because I go to Oaxaca and I stay 2 or 3 weeks. And the other trips are because I'm going to the dentist. And I go and I come." And
that's something very common that many people in San Diego cross over the border.
Or from Los Angeles, of course.
For health services,
yes,
yeah.
Yes, and it's very clearly stated on the N400 that the only trips that they want printed or listed are the trips that are more than 24 hours. And so clearly she's going to the dentist and returning. She's doing all this in the same day. So they would not be included on her N400. Then the officer, right, so she's shown her this list, and my student is looking, she's beginning to ask. The officer then says, she queries her, she asks her, "Your mother is ill. What is she sick of? What is her illness?" And so my student proceeds to explain what that is. And then she talks about, "Well, why else are you going?" And my student says, "Because I'm going to the dentist." And my student never takes her eyes off of this.
Very smart.
She recounted this when she came to class. She said to everyone in class, she said, "I looked straight at the officer. I was telling the truth, but I'm looking straight at the officer and I'm explaining to her." So the officer...
Wait a second, can you take a second? Mm-hmm. Why is maintaining eye contact so important?
Oh, because the officer is clearly assessing the student to see if she's lying. Number one, I'm the teacher, and I'm just thinking about what happened. This is the first time that I have ever had, and I've taught for 35 years, that I have a student who tells me that the officer pulls out a printed sheet of all of their trips across the border. I've never heard that. I'm sure that they know, because every time you come back, you have to put your green card. Yeah. So they would know that. But that I'm going to say that I believe that they had the officer or somebody else in USCIS had thought that she might be doing some illegal activity. Mm-hmm. That's my assumption. They didn't. Mm-hmm. That's why she was very, very detailed about. She said, "Now, what is wrong with your mom? Mm-hmm. Just what kind of illnesses does she have?" My student, right? And then after that, then my student indicated that the other trips were coming back, and they were just going to. I know. It was very interesting because after that, the officer said, well, are you the only daughter? As if somebody else should be taking care of the mother. So that was another question in the interview. And my student said, no, I have several brothers, but I'm the one who goes, they don't live with her, just like my student doesn't live with her, but goes back and checks on her. Then she justified, or she didn't justify, she just explained, I go to the dentist, I'm having dental work done, and this is what I do.
And you said it very simply.
Right, no, she looked at her straight in the eye and she said this. What I was going to say, I lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me, but...
I'm going to go back to a lot of times people drop their gaze as a show of respect, but she held the officer's gaze not as a challenge, but to demonstrate that she is telling her the honest truth.
And when my student came back to class, she reinforced that to everyone else. She said, my gaze never left her eyes. I looked her straight in the eye. And I answered, and she was simply telling the truth, but she didn't look down. She looked her straight in the eye. She made a conscious effort to do that. Clearly, there was a moment when enough explanation had been that she had convinced the officer. And the officer said, okay, that's done. Turned over the paper, printed sheet, turned it over, and then she proceeded to the 100 questions. Now, my student was still in shock because my student is really, really tense. She's looking at the officer straight in the eye, and she's like this. And she said, I was frozen. And so the first question the officer asked was, what is the rule of law? And my student was just still frozen. But the officer had clearly been convinced, because at that point said, all right, now we're going to the 100 questions. So she had already said that before, but my student wasn't able to make that transition. So then she did it again. She said, okay, it's going to be okay, just, all right. And then started with another one, and then she defreezed. So she defrosted or whatever. But then, and she was quite able to answer the 5 questions that came up. There was a lot about the application, but none of that was different. The most different part was when the student explains that there's a printed sheet with all her trips just for this year.
Thanks to the students and staff of Milpitas Adult School. A special thanks goes out to Dr. Patricia Hernandez and all our friends and colleagues at CATISL. Please visit us on our YouTube channel, where you will hear the second part of Dr. Hernandez's interview in Spanish, where she retells the story with some added detail. Also check our show notes for more information about talking about travel for your U.S. citizenship interview. Please visit us also on our web at uscitizenpod.com. Thanks for listening. I know you will be a great American citizen. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.